first class, but Professor Mendel treated me as if I was a primary school pupil. I'm sorry, but I'm angry, as you can see." Arthur leaned back, still smiling, and said nothing for a while, allowing the younger man opposite to talk at length, going red in the face as he did so, his voice stuttering as he became more angry. "Of course I know Goldman and Mendel are both Jews. I'd not felt able to mention that to anyone, not until now. Obviously I'm not prejudiced, but I don't need anyone to tell me about Jews and what they could get up to. I'm an expert in medieval literature, after all, especially German medieval literature, and even legends have some basis in fact." When he finished, he looked as if he was about to cry, yet at the same time relieved to have unburdened himself. He muttered an apology as he drank his beer, and Arthur told him not to worry. Of course, he understood. In fact, he'd also been the victim of Jews, as had so many people he knew. Between you and me, I've heard that a wealthy relative of Goldman's had promised money to the college funds. How do you know that? Let's just say the people I know are very well aware of these matters. Tell me, how much was the Sawston Award worth? £150. It would have meant I could concentrate on my doctorate for an entire academic year and not have to take on anything else, like working in the library and writing essays for barely literate but very wealthy undergrads on closed scholarships. Arthur stood up. He was not a particularly imposing figure, but he looked confident. The kind of person who usually got his way. "There are some like-minded people I think you ought to meet. Could you come down to London for dinner one night next month?" He said it depended on the day, but possibly, yes. "I'll write to you at Jesus. Meanwhile, this will help you with your expenses. Best not open it till you're back in your rooms." The man left the pub without waiting for him. He finished his drink, composed himself, and went back to his rooms. It was only later on, when the poetry of von Eschenbach became a bit too much, that he remembered the envelope the man had given him. For the next hour, he stared at its contents scattered across his narrow bed. White £10 notes, 10 of them, £100. Chapter 1. Nijmegen, Arnhem, the Netherlands, September 1944. "Is anyone else alive?" None of those gathered around him replied. The room was dark and damp, with the smell of earth and disinfectant hanging heavy in the air. There were 4 or 5 others there, a couple of medics, an officer from Divisional Intelligence, and another officer from Corps Headquarters, the ones who were supposed to have rescued them. None of them looked directly at him. Second Lieutenant Andrew Reeves of the South Staffordshire Regiment was slumped on the floor, clutching a flask of water tightly with both hands to stop its contents spilling out. A doctor had already taken a quick look at him and said he was fine, and told the medics to dress his wounds. In truth, Reeves looked dreadful. His face and hands were filthy. He hadn't shaved for days, and his eyes were bloodshot. The parts of his face not covered in oil and soot were deathly white. "So, all the others are dead. I'm the only one left?" "No, of course not, Reeves. Look, we just need to debrief you. Then you can have a hot meal and a rest. I bet you're looking forward to that, eh?" It was the officer from Corps Headquarters doing his best to sound jolly, while trying to muffle a hacking cough. Somewhere in the distance came the sound of artillery fire, and Reeves jumped at the sound. "What about my platoon? Last time I counted them, there were still a dozen alive." "I fear it may be fewer than that now." Second Lieutenant Reeves nodded, as if he was expecting as much. "And B Company?" "I assumed command of it when Captain Hall was killed. There were 90 men when I took over." The officer from Divisional Intelligence shook his head. "Perhaps a dozen were evacuated. Look, how about you have that nice hot meal first, and then a rest, and we can ask you a few questions afterwards." "And the rest of the brigade?" "We're still working that out. We know the 1st Air Landing Brigade sent in 2,500 men, and we estimate..."